Hello everyone, welcome to a brand new season of Into the Kinoverse. I am your host, Pure Kino, and what a season this is going to be, because we are going to be doing Better Call Saul logs on this podcast. Now, if you have no idea what's going on, the last episode that I released before this one on Spotify, titled Season Finale, explains my thoughts behind the podcast and what my plans are for this season. So if you haven't listened to that episode, definitely go check it out. But I'm going to proceed as if everyone kind of knows what I'm doing here. I will say up front, though, that this is the Into the Kinoverse podcast, which is usually only available on Spotify. However, this is also going to be available on my YouTube channel, Kino Studios. It's not the main channel. It's not Pure Kino, but it's my side channel. If you're not subscribed to that, definitely do that. You can find that in the description of this podcast if you're listening to it on Spotify. If you're on YouTube, if you go to my main channel, if you click on the channels tab of my channel, it'll take you to Kino Studios, or you can just look up Kino Studios. But either way, you can watch anywhere you want to. But this is a podcast that's going to be available on multiple platforms. Now, the reason I'm doing that is just because, again, this is kind of a throwback to my old Soprano log and Breaking Bad log style videos, so I figured it was YouTube appropriate. However, this is still podcast content. Now, forgive me, I'm a little bit out of form. I haven't done a log series in like years. The last one I did was Breaking Bad, and that was multiple years ago, but regardless, I'm getting back into this, and I just watched the first episode of Better Call Saul, the pilot, Season 1, Episode 1, Uno. Now, I'm going to try to avoid just doing a lot of plot summary. I did that for a reason when I did the Soprano logs and the Breaking Bad logs, but I'm going to figure that most of you probably remember it. I'm going to give a very brief overview, and then I'm going to talk about some of the stuff that I noticed in this episode. So, obviously, we begin with a flash forward sequence. This takes place after Breaking Bad, so I'm not going to explain the events of Breaking Bad to you. I'm going to assume that if you are watching Better Call Saul, you have seen Breaking Bad. And that's actually an important point that I'm going to bring up at the end of the episode when we get to the question. But for now, I'm just going to assume that you saw Breaking Bad and you know that that Saul, the character of Saul Goodman, was the lawyer in that show. He goes into not witness protection. It's like a criminal version of witness protection. He goes into hiding, basically. And he's living an assumed identity as this guy named Gene, who is the manager of a Cinnabon in Omaha, Nebraska. That's actually the exact same thing that he said he was going to do at the end of Breaking Bad. He said, best case scenario, 6 months from now, I'm working at a Cinnabon in Nebraska. So they copied that directly from Breaking Bad. But he's working there. It's kind of a depressing life. Again, no shade to people who do that, because I know a lot of people do work like that. But, you know, for a guy like Saul, who was previously this hotshot lawyer, had all this money, to kind of be reduced to this is very depressing, which is why this flash forward sequence is in black and white. We're reflecting the kind of grayness of his life and the lack of joy that he has now that he's in hiding. You know, there's even scenes where he's worried that someone might be coming to get him, although I don't know who would be coming to get him. I assume the cops would be coming to get him because he's a wanted criminal, but I don't know why he's always so worried about like these like thug type characters, like someone sent someone to kill him. I guess you could argue maybe he thinks it's Lalo, which we'll get to Lalo in later seasons, but regardless, I don't know who he's scared of per se, but regardless, he's kind of a nervous wreck. He goes back home and he's, you know, just sitting around drinking. Side note, the drink that he's drinking is a Rusty Nail. And from what I've read online, I've never heard of it before, but it's a very like old-fashioned type drink associated with like grumpy old men, and that's again kind of reflecting the sad state that he's living in. And he decides to watch his old commercials. He opens a box of his old goods, and some of the stuff in this box is going to be important later on, but we'll get to that later. And I should have let you guys know ahead of time, but I will be spoiling stuff that's going to happen in future episodes. I know people get pissed off at me when I do that in these logs. They're like, I'm watching alongside you. I don't really understand the point. Like, that's the reason why I used to only do plot summaries. It's because people would complain. They're like, well, I'm watching along with you. And it's like, well, then I can't talk about future episodes, and how am I supposed to share what these details mean, you know? So I will be spoiling future stuff, although I'll try to keep it as focused on this episode in particular as I can. But regardless, he pulls out a tape of his old Saul Goodman commercials from this box and starts watching them. And I'm going to talk more about the cinematography in a little bit, but I just want to bring up here that I love the use of color. Even though this scene is in black and white, when you see the reflection of the commercial, you don't actually see the commercial, but you see the reflection of it in his glasses as he's watching it. You see the color there, and again, that's hinting that he's not happy in this life, but he was really happy as Saul Goodman. So, brilliant use of color to convey that here, and I really like it. From there, we go to a flashback. So this takes in the Better Call Saul timeline, which takes place before Breaking Bad. We follow Saul Goodman. Before he was Saul Goodman, he's known as Jimmy McGill. He's a public defender, a very struggling public defender, trying to make a buck, but he's constantly having setbacks. We're introduced to Mike Ehrmantraut, who is a major character out of nowhere. He's working as a toll booth person. Really shocking because you're like, what the hell is Mike doing here in this incredibly small role? But it will be explained later on. Jimmy goes to meet with these two people, Craig and Betsy Kettleman. Betsy is the first introduction of the many, many Better Call Saul waifus of the show, played by Julia Ann Emery, I believe her name was. Julie Ann Emery, by the way. Gorgeous, gorgeous woman. And again, she's one of the many waifus that have come out of this show, but I really like her a lot. The guy Craig is accused of having embezzled like $1.6 million from the Treasury, and Jimmy wants to sign them because obviously they're going to pay him a lot of money to be their lawyer, but they decide to wait on it for now, and he's disappointed. On his way back home, he runs into this kid on a skateboard, although it's actually a scam being run by these two, deadbeat teenagers who are just trying to shake him down for some money. He obviously sees through it because he was a con artist previously, and they run away, basically. Then Jimmy goes to his office, which is actually the back room of the Vietnamese nail salon. It's like a very rundown place, obviously not a good look for a lawyer, but it's the only place that he can afford. Now, real quick, this nail salon here is not the same nail salon that Jimmy pitches to Jesse Pinkman in Better Call Saul. It's not the same place. The one that he pitches to Jesse to buy in Breaking Bad was owned by someone named Mrs. Mujayaporn. I don't know where that name comes from. In fact, I'll probably just Google it right now. I have my computer open while I'm doing this, by the way. I can't really find out where this name comes from. It does not sound Vietnamese to me. I am Asian, by the way, for those of you who don't know. And that always surprises people when I tell them that. It sounds more Indian or at the very Indonesian, maybe, actually, it looks like here. Regardless, this one that's owned by a Mrs. Nguyen is not the same one from Breaking Bad, which is a little bit weird. I don't know why they didn't make it just the same one. They love connecting stuff from Better Call Saul to Breaking Bad, but regardless, it's not the same place. He gets a check from the law firm of Hamlin McGill, which was founded by his brother, Chuck McGill. He tears up the check, goes over there and gives him his mind, which is he wants his brother Chuck, who's a founding partner, to be paid out 1/3 of the company rather than these little kind of like measly payment checks. However, the other owner of the company, Howard, refuses, and there's a very adversarial relationship between Jimmy and Howard. We will, of course, expand upon that in future episodes, but obviously, Jimmy does not like Howard. As we're leaving here, we have a scene where Jimmy kicks the shit out of a trash can, and it's very much similar to the scene in 4 Days Out where Walt just destroys this paper towel dispenser in a bathroom, taking out his rage on it, and it's an obvious callback to that scene in Breaking Bad. However, after going out, he sees Kim Wexler, who is someone he knows. Again, we don't know much about the relationship in this episode, but we're going to expand upon it in future episodes. And they share this very tender moment with a cigarette. And I just have to say, very, very sexy scene. they do this, again, talking about the many, many waifus this show creates, they do this incredible job making Kim, like, very, like, sexy, but not, like, revealing. Like, she's not dressing, provocatively or anything like that. There are sexual situations with her later between her and Jimmy, but just the way they're sharing this cigarette, it's, like, so intimate. It's, like, really well done. It tells you about the relationship without having to be salacious, which I really like about this show. And also a very gorgeous use of shadows in this scene. They do a really great job with lighting in this episode and in the series in general. So, yeah, really great job. Later on, Jimmy goes to visit Chuck, who is his brother. Now, Chuck suffers from this disease where he's sensitive to electricity. Like, if he senses electricity, he just, like, goes crazy. He feels, like, intense pain. It's not clear yet, like, what the disease actually is or anything like that, but we're going to expand upon it further. Jimmy tries to get Chuck to leave the firm because he's too sick to work there, but Chuck refuses because, he doesn't want to give up all his life's work, and he thinks he's going to improve. Although Jimmy has been basically supporting Chuck this entire time, taking care of him, because Chuck can't leave the house and get groceries and stuff like that. I also want to point out that there's some really incredible dialogue that hints at the future relationship between Jimmy and Chuck. Jimmy asks Chuck, whose side are you really on? And of course, if you know Better Call Saul, you'll know that that's a very interesting statement. But Chuck also tells Jimmy that he should build his own identity, specifically telling him not to use the name McGill. And that's, again, related to the relationship secretly. But even setting that aside, it's very interesting that he tells him to build his own identity because, of course, that's what he's going to do with the Saul Goodman persona. So really great, subtle dialogue there that hints at the future relationship between the two. After this, Jimmy decides that he's desperate and he's going to do something drastic. So he approaches those two kids who tried to pull the scam on him, and he tells them about his backstory. So back in Cicero, Illinois, where he's from, he's actually known as Slippin' Jimmy. The name comes from the fact that he used to run these like scams where he would slip on a patch of ice and extort money from people. And so he's very familiar with their game, and he tells them that if they help him, he will get them a lot of money. And what they're planning on doing is pulling a scam on Betsy Kettleman in order to kind of trick her into becoming really scared, and then Jimmy would save her, and then she would presumably hire him as her lawyer. So he sets up the whole thing, shows them what her car is, tells them about the scam, and tells them to run it. However, they make a mistake. When they do the scam, it turns out not to be Betsy Kettleman. This person just drives off, and they end up following her to her house, and it turns out to be this older Mexican woman. By the way, the two cars are not the same cars. Betsy Kettleman's car is a 1988 Mercury Sable, and the one that Abuelita is driving is a Ford Taurus. They look similar. I didn't notice it at first. I only kind of noticed it doing research for this log afterwards, but they are not the same car. But they actually do have the same, they start with the same number. They start with 4 on the license plate, which Jimmy did point out. So it's kind of a case of, it is their fault, but there's also some things that were similar. So I could see why they might get confused. Regardless, they follow her, they demand money, and we don't know what happens. It cuts from there. Jimmy's searching for them, trying to figure out what's going on. He sees their skateboards, goes up to the house, bangs on the door, and demands to be let in. When the door opens, there's a gun that's immediately pointed into his face, and we see someone who we're familiar with if you've ever watched Breaking Bad, one of the central villains of the first season, Tuco Salamanca. So we realize that this is Tuco's house, and if you know anything about Tuco, this was not a place you actually want to be. So that's where the episode ends, on this very dramatic cliffhanger for those of you who are fans of Breaking Bad. But that brings me to the question of the day. So I'm going to do something where I do I take a question or comment about the episode from my audience. For this first one, I got it from the Discord. If you're not in the Discord, definitely join that. The link is in the description of all of these videos and podcasts. But I polled my audience there, and I got a question from RoboGamer, who asks, should Breaking Bad or Better Call Saul be watched first? And I love this question because this episode is a perfect example of why I believe what I believe, which is you should watch Breaking Bad first. Like, you can't watch Better Call Saul first. Now, I know there's a lot of people out there who do that. I know there's a lot of people who've said, no, I watched Better Call Saul first because, it takes place first chronologically, and then I just watch Breaking Bad afterwards, and people make jokes about that and stuff like that. But it's totally fine to do that if you want to do that, but I think you're robbing yourself of the true experience of Better Call Saul if you don't watch Breaking Bad first, because again, this ending scene is a perfect example of that. If you didn't watch Breaking Bad, you're like, who is this guy? I don't know who he is. Now, yes, you can kind of get the context that he pointed a gun in Saul's face that like, oh, okay, this is like a serious person, it's a dangerous situation, but you're missing out on so much if you don't know the history of who Tuco is. So my answer is I would 100% recommend watching Better Call Saul first. I know there's a lot of people who love, sorry, did I say Better Call Saul? I don't know if I said that. Watch Breaking Bad before Better Call Saul. I don't remember if I said that right, but definitely watch Breaking Bad first. I know there's people who like Better Call Saul more, but regardless, I still think you'll enjoy Better Call Saul more if you watch Breaking Bad. And even if you don't like Breaking Bad, you're like, I'm all about the Better Call Saul stuff, you'll still be better informed about what's going on if you watch Breaking Bad first. So that's just my advice. And that's pretty much everything I had to say about this episode. Thank you guys for listening. Again, I know it's going to take me a little bit to get used to doing this format again. I'm going completely off the cuff like I used to do in the early days of the Soprano Logs, but I'm hoping that this one goes a little bit smoother than those episodes did. But we'll improve as we go. If you guys have a question or a comment that you want to be included in the next episode, so Season 1, Episode 2, Miho, feel free to leave it in Discord or leave it in the comment section on the YouTube video here. So just say, my question for Miho, and then put your question or comment, whatever you want to include. And I'll pick one comment or question each time I do an episode. I want to include the feedback from you guys there. So hopefully you guys have enjoyed this, and stay tuned for more Better Call Saul logs coming soon. Alright, if you're a patron supporting this channel, you're now a producer of the podcast. Congratulations. Matt Joyce, Uncle Mike, Sam Cedarland, Celery Man, Countess von Zarevich, Admiral, Neil Varma, and Juan Jaramillo.